Welcome to another episode of How Did This Get Made? My name is Peter Cho, and with me, as always, is.
Christine?
And this week we are looking at Nicolas Cage in Vampire's Kiss and Face Off. We'll be just talking about Cage a lot, I think, in other things as well, but we'll focus on basically what is the best use of Nicolas Cage's talents. And that's pretty open on how you want to interpret that. So I am going to jump into my old man reminiscences, and I will begin with Vampire's Kiss. I actually saw that when it came out in the theaters, and it was because I saw the trailer, and I thought, okay, that's weird. I mean, this was late 80s, it was 1988, but I think I read somewhere, in some magazine or article, that he eats a real cockroach in it. That's why I wanted to see it.
That's it? That's the only thing that interested you?
That's all it took. I was like, that looks weird, but it's like I just want what? I have to see this movie. So this is pretty vague because I'm trying to remember specific things, but I can't. It's more like I remember seeing it and not knowing who Nicolas Cage was. I might have seen him in something else, but I don't think so. So it wasn't about Nicolas Cage at all when I saw that movie. It was just like, okay, this weird guy's acting really strange. All right, he eats that cockroach. And I remember thinking that, oh, yeah, that was kind of weird, but I kind of dismissed it. I just remember thinking this is strange, and then not thinking, "Oh my God, this is one of the craziest and worst things I've ever seen." I remember just kind of shrugging, which is kind of weird in retrospect. For Face Off, I could do again a really, really long thing about that, just because I love John Woo, who directed Face Off. I would say that he was my favorite director of like the '90s. I started getting into his stuff because of TIFF and Suspect Video, and I sort of caught up in his late 80s Hong Kong films. And I remember seeing Hard Boiled, which is a masterpiece. Hard Boiled and The Killer were basically my two favorite movies for the longest time. I just love the way John Woo makes films, and I love, as I call it, the Hong Kong melodrama. Like it's just so operatic. I don't know if you've seen any, but it's yeah, it's like opera. It's so over the top. All of the acting's over the top. All the music's over the top. All the action scenes are over the top. But I genuinely love it. I don't look down at it. I don't laugh at it. I'm like, oh God, this is the best. And when I heard he's coming to America, I thought, God, this is going to be amazing. He's going to have big budgets and great actors. And then, of course, the first one was Hard Target, which was tough. And then he did Broken Arrow. And by the time he got to Face Off, I was sort of hesitant in the sense of, oh, maybe he's just completely diluted and will never make a movie like he did in Hong Kong, where again, it's operatic and over the top and really crazy. But then came Face Off. And I thought, oh yeah, this is pure woo. I would say that the first time I watched it, when it came out, I enjoyed it, but I was actually really bothered by the plot. You know, sometimes you get a high concept idea, and you either accept it or you don't. So for some reason, that first screening, I knew what the plot was. I knew that they're going to change faces. But when it was going on, I kept thinking, that doesn't make sense. Like, yeah, I wouldn't believe that. And of course, subsequently, you can't think about that. I mean, you can, but I don't. I just accept it now. But it really bothered me on that first viewing. So again, I was like, it's good, but I wish he could really, unleash what he really wanted to do. And there's one thing in particular that bugged me, which I don't want to bring up now, but we'll talk about later. I want to lead this into you, where I believe I was part of the first screenings for both of these.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
Vampire's Kiss, we watched. I don't know, like maybe you had told us about it. I don't know how we came across this movie, but we watched it as a group and then watched the director's commentary as a group only maybe a couple of years ago.
Well, I remember Tiff had the spotlight on Nicolas Cage.
Face Off was in there. Was Vampire's Kiss?
Yeah, I mean, you don't remember this
I
one.
don't. Of course I don't. I don't remember anything.
I'll tell you when you first saw these movies.
Did I see it in the theater or did we was it when we rented it? I thought it was when we rented it.
No, it was in the theater. So for Face Off, I kept bugging you, saying, "Oh, it's playing." They played them like Saturday at 11 p.m. Remember you were closing that night, and I said, "Oh God, you have to see this movie in the theater." By the time you closed up, you would have missed like the first hour. And I said, "You okay? You're gonna watch the first hour at home, and then join us. You can see the big finale in the theater." But you didn't make it, so you didn't go to that screening. But they said, you and our friend Vic, it's like you two are coming to Vampire's Kiss no matter what. And it was like on a Wednesday when we weren't working. You two just like thinking, what is going on? And then we subsequently did watch it at Vic's house, and then part of the commentary as well. You don't remember this?
Yeah. I don't see the thing is I've seen it a bunch of times now, so I feel like all of the screenings just kind of blend into one. So I have a time separating what's what. But and even with Face Off, like I do remember I tried to watch the first hour so that I could make it after my shift was done, and then I couldn't make it, so I had to watch the second half later. So even that, it's like separate screenings, so it all kind of blends together. But I think rewatching it for this, I think that's only the second time that I've seen it. I don't know. I thought I had more fun the first time, but we'll talk about that, I guess.
Since this episode really is on Cage, so what are your general thoughts about him? And when did you, because, when we were talking about Wild at Heart, remember we were discussing, is this
Hmm.
when Cage became Cage? And, that kind of sparked this podcast, where if you look at his history, it's like, oh, Cage was Cage way before that.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of forgot that all of this came before. I don't know, man. I kind of go back and forth with him. I think I like him. I think he's one of these guys now at this point where I never know what he's gonna do, so I'm always intrigued. If he's made a new movie, I'll check it out in some form. Maybe not straight away, but eventually. I really love Moonstruck, and he's the version of caginess in Moonstruck, but it is kind of toned down, and it kind of fits because it's such an over the top character. And then but that still seems like normal, like a quote unquote normal acting performance to me. And then with Wild at Heart, you can kind of like sort of make sense of it because it's a David Lynch movie, and if you've seen enough Lynch, you know that the performances in his movies are so mannered. It doesn't matter who is doing the performance, so even that it doesn't seem like it's necessarily super cagey. So I feel like with him, probably when I saw Con Air, which for some reason I used to watch all the time. I don't know why. Like late teens, early 20s. Whenever it was on TV, I would watch it. I genuinely like that movie. I know it's stupid and the accents are all over the place and weird, but it's fun, man. So I kind of go back and forth, you know? I really love Con Air and then I really love Moonstruck, and I still don't totally know if I like what he does all the time, but I guess I kind of do. He just confuses me. I feel confused even just talking about it. It was hurting my head.
I feel the same way in the sense of I'm always interested when he's in a movie because you don't know what he's going to do. I think it's really ballsy that he's like, no, I don't want to be a Coppola. I don't want people to think about me and his uncle Francis. So he changed his name to Nicolas Cage, which is based on Luke Cage. Yeah, right from the start. Like, yeah, Peggy Sue got married and Valley Girl. He just started doing these weird accents. So I would say it's like, oh, he just wanted to be a chameleon. Like he never wanted to so-called be himself, whatever that is. I think it's with any actor. Pacino's a good example. It's like people are used to making fun of him and him screaming. So they just want to see him do that essentially at this point. They become a joke. So it's hard for them to be taken seriously again, I think. And, remember when we saw Mandy, we both
Hmm.
went in there just wanting to see him go nuts, right?
Yeah, and then I mean he does. So the scene where he drinks the bottle of vodka in the bathroom, definitely there is stuff that anyone who just wants to see a Cage freak out will get. But I still also feel like I was surprised by that movie and his performance. It didn't feel like he was just phoning it in, whereas sometimes Pacino kind of seems like he just shouts lines without thought. Like I think there is thought going on there, and I still really liked it. I think the thing is with someone like Nicolas Cage, the movies he chooses, regardless of whether he does a lot of the same cagey type things in them, they're always really unusual, the movies themselves. So that combination makes it seem less like a paycheck gig where he'll just do what give the people what they want, and it makes it seem more like there's a reason behind it. You know, he's doing it for a purpose. I'm just looking over his filmography, and I take it back. I am sure how I feel about him. I think yes, I like what he does because I forget about, as you say, Mandy. I enjoyed that. That was totally different. And then of course the Bad Lieutenant, which is one I just love that movie. But I think the thing with him, it's teamed up with certain directors that makes the difference. If the director has a really distinct style and is down with over the top performance, I think it works. Which might be a good way to get into discussion of these two movies, because although the director of Vampire's Kiss is not very well known, I think they had a pretty strong relationship. And then John Woo, of course, is really iconic and has his own way of doing things in a really, as you say, melodramatic kind of way too. I don't always get everything he does, but I like being there to watch it happen. And I was gonna say, I never bought that whole "oh, my name is Nicolas Cage because I don't want to be a Coppola" thing. I never really bought it. Just doing this, watching these movies, I think I do now. And after what you said there, where he just doesn't really want to be, he wants to be someone else, not who he is, and he gets rid of his name and stuff. I think you're right. Even if he did keep the name Coppola, he's so way different from all the rest of them that it's almost as if they have nothing to do with it. Like you never hear any of the other Coppolas talk about him, as far as I know. He doesn't really talk about them. He's like the black sheep off doing his own thing. Which so he changed his name, but also in every movie he does, it's like he's making you remember he's his own guy. So I didn't buy it before, but I think I buy it now.
A long time ago, I was trying to riff off actors who've worked with like my personal favorite directors, and Nick Cage one. Is that he worked with John Woo, Herzog, the Coen Brothers, Scorsese, Lynch, Oliver Stone, Ridley Scott, Coppola, Brian De Palma. I'm like, he's done all of it. I don't know if he searched that out, but I think a lot of those directors just said, "Oh God, we have to work with Nicolas Cage somehow."
Which seems crazy, but I'm glad that they did because they're all good, and he does something strange and unusual in most of those, and somehow it works.
There's two things that I heard. He buys so many houses and outrageous things and comic books that he needs to take all these roles to pay off stuff. So it's like, oh, you're one of those actors. It's just like, oh, you'll take anything to pay that off. But then a long time ago, again, I read an interview where he just flat out said, I'll take a role if the character's interesting. He doesn't say if the movie's interesting or the director's interesting. He just thinks, oh, I think I could play with that, which is admirable, explains a lot. But I'm like, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think I read that he did have a bunch of properties, and he talked about how people say that all the time, like how he's only choosing roles because he needs to pay off debts, and he acknowledged that that's a rumor about him. He didn't say it was true, but he also made a point in the article to mention how he has a really simple life now, and he just lives, I think, in some sort of English manor in the country in England. So that kind of suggested it might have been true. So I think there was a period where maybe he was just doing that. I don't know. But I don't know if that's the reason anymore. You know what I mean? Like doing something like Mandy, I don't think that's paying a lot.
Yeah.
It's so independent. Color Out of Space, which I haven't seen yet, but it seems like sort of similar to Mandy in style. I don't think he has to do it anymore. I think now he just says to himself, yeah, that looks weird. I've never done that before. And then does it.
I am one of those people that I love watching his earlier roles, especially with those directors I mentioned. But Nowadays, I think it's because I don't expect much out of him that when I watched Color of Space, I was like, oh yeah, but he didn't go crazy enough. Like that is all I want to see
Mm.
from him now, which is totally unfair. It was good to watch or think about his earlier movies. Like, oh yeah, he's a good actor. Like I think he can do a really serious role right now and do a performance like Leaving Las Vegas, right? I don't know whether he wants to. I don't know if studios want to, but I think it's still in him.
I think it is, but I could see him being kind of bored by that. He doesn't seem like it seems like the only reason he would do something like that is to prove to critics and fans that he can still do it, and I don't think that's anything he would ever do. I don't think he cares enough about what other people think to do that, but what do I know? That's my guess. I just forgot that he was also in The Weatherman, which I talk about all the time because in his character, he talks about when it's rainy and he calls it a sprit snipper. I reference that a lot in my day to day life. Anyway, just a little side note for you.
I was just be trying to figure out this podcast and picking the two films, and then I was so excited. I sent the video to you too, where he always connects Vampire's Kiss and Face Off because he says, well, Vampire's Kiss is his favorite movie that he's appeared in. Right. He goes, that's where he really unleashed himself. And the way he described it was like a German expressionist silent acting. And he just loved doing these crazy body movements and bugging his eyes out and waving his arms. And then he said, well, Face Off was fun because he wanted to apply the techniques specifically from Vampire's Kiss into a major Hollywood action movie. So that like he says that he was particularly like mimicking or thinking about what he did in Vampire's Kiss. And the photo that you're going to use for this episode is the bug eye sequences. It's just it's the same thing he brought back.
Yeah, I wish I had known his intention about his acting style before I had seen Vampire's Kiss because when I watched it the first time and the second time, it was just what is this insanity? Like I didn't understand it, and it was okay that I didn't understand it because I had a laugh. But now that I know about the whole German expressionism thing, it makes complete sense. And I still think we'll get into it. I still think it's a completely bizarre way to perform, but he does a pretty good job at mimicking Nosferatu. So I see it now, and I give him props for even trying it. It just seems like a really crazy decision to make because you think when an actor tells you, "Okay, I'm gonna perform in the style of like a German expressionist vampire, as in Nosferatu," you would think, "Oh, that's interesting." You don't. You think he's gonna come with some kind of nuanced new version of something that was influenced by, but no, he just straight up starts behaving like Max Shrek, right? Like the way he holds his body, he's completely just imitating Nosferatu. And I don't know, it just is insane, but also slightly brilliant.
Do you think that Vampire's Kiss like, is a real comedy?
This is what I was going to ask you because I saw something that said, or I think it was in the director's commentary. The director said that it was a comedy, but not a joke. The thing is, some of the things that Nicolas Cage does is funny, but the tone of the movie, maybe when we're talking about, depending on what director he works with, but the tone of the movie doesn't feel like a comedy to me. At first seems like it could be a comedy, but then it gets really dark. I mean, there's a rape scene and the way he treats women. I'm like, how can a comedy have a rape scene? You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense. So I think maybe the director wanted it to be a comedy. It doesn't sound like the writer thought it was a comedy. I think he was basing it on a really dark time in his life. So I don't know. I I maybe they both thought it was a comedy and Cage tried to play it that way, but I don't see how you could successfully do that with the way that Alva is treated.
Yeah. So we're near the beginning of the commentary which both of them are sitting there reminiscing. I think it's 12 years later. And I think the director says, well, the thing about this movie is people don't know what it's about and they don't understand it. And then Cage just flat out says, well, that could be a good thing. And I love ambiguity. So you could interpret it whatever way you like. But he says, well, I think it's about a sad character who can't get love anywhere and goes insane. Like so his idea of that is like, that's not funny.
No, it's not funny at all. Also, I don't think that that's what it's about. I would argue that it's not. Um, Not to me anyway. I didn't read it that way. I sort of read it as he, quote unquote, gets bitten by this woman who just exposes him for what he is. He's not a literal vampire. He's a figurative vampire. It's a guy who just has no interest in women except as objects, doesn't really care about anyone around him except for himself. He's a narcissist. He just like sucks all the air out of the room. I think that it's not about somebody who's lonely and wants love. I don't think he's interested in love at all. I think he's just interested in taking and taking and taking. And then he thinks he's a vampire where all he is controlled by that lust and that want to take more and more. I don't know, maybe that's too far. You can tell me if I'm reading much too into it, but I think it, like I said, exposes who he actually is and he doesn't like it. And then that drives him mad.
Yeah, I mean, well, I do think his character is lonely, but as opposed to because of our podcast of Taxi Driver, where it's like, oh, this character is really, really unbalanced. Peter's way more integrated in society since he has a job with an office, which in the boardroom, where it's like, I don't think it's a commentary, but it's like, oh yeah, all these men in higher up positions are horrible.
No, I think it's totally a commentary. And that's why I started to think about what the movie's actually about. I don't think it's a guy who, as he's wants relationships with women. I think it's about men at this time in this situation. Because I actually thought to myself, okay, so his character, Peter, is obviously going insane, has problems, crazy problems with thinking he's a vampire and also wanting to kill his secretary. But what's everybody else's excuse, right? Like, he's this awful creature and they're all normal, but they're just as bad as he is. Even when she's being traced to the office, nobody helps her. The women in the women's room just like, that's enough of that, and walks out or whatever she says. So I don't know. I think if I was getting, maybe I've seen it too many times, but it does sort of seem like a commentary on 80s sort of chauvinistic capitalism a little bit, which maybe makes me like it more. I don't know. Is it really that deep? Maybe not, because maybe there was things that they left out that made it seem more about a man who was lonely and wanted love and that was on the editing room floor. Who knows? But to me, it doesn't seem that way.
Christian Bale watched Cage and Vampires Kiss a lot for American Psycho.
See? They're like mirror versions of each other. That's exactly spot on. And that's what it's making a commentary about, right? American Psycho is a commentary of this exact time period and this type of character.
Yeah.
So, you didn't answer. Did you think it's a comedy?
Oh no, I don't. So, when I first saw it, I was just like shrugging. I'm like, I just didn't know what to feel. I'm like, wait a minute, because I didn't know Cage was, so I didn't think, oh my god, this is a crazy performance. I just thought, what is going on here? The director and Cage keep saying this was a low budget film. We got to do whatever we want. It was non-union, so then they just kept sending Cage on the street and shooting. At the end, when he grabs a stick and there's a couple coming by, because I'm a vampire, I'm a vampire. It's like those are just street people that he's harassing, and they're
Oh,
just
they don't seem to care at all, though.
funny again. It's like that's New York, and the sad part is when Cage is all bloody and talking to himself, and he thinks he's talking to his therapist. He goes, "Oh well, I've seen people in New York do that, so I copied that." Things like that. And when he's running down the street saying, I'm a vampire," he said he saw somebody in New York running down the street saying there are vampires. So he just appropriated it. So I'm like, what? He's taking real life events for this insanity? That just made me a little sad.
It's a little sad. It's also amazing that he was there at both these. How does he always see these people? What's he doing?
But you see
Where's
that
he hanging out?
that's New York, right? That's what I keep
I,
thinking.
I guess. What about the mimes on the street? Where did that come from? That was so weird. He goes to, I think it's a hotel. There's
Yeah.
just a couple of mimes hanging out. See, again, I don't think it's his fault. I think he's doing his best to make it a dark comedy. But the director just seems all over the place, and same with the writer. I think no, I think the writer knows it wasn't. Doesn't seem like it's supposed to be a comedy, but the director doesn't have comedy chops. I think because
Yeah.
then he throws in mimes, and you're like, oh, is this maybe this is a silly movie? And then you never should really see anything like that again. I feel like it all rests on Cage's performance to be funny, and it is, but it's just delivered in a way that I don't think they expected people to be laughing.
It is one of those cases where Cage just went nuts and the director didn't rein him in. Not only that, when Cage jumps on the desk and screams at her, that was the director's idea. He was like, "Oh, Nicholas, jump on the." So it wasn't just it was them feeding off of each other. And what I can't believe was when he said, "Oh yeah, people make fun of Nicolas Cage's accent in this, but when he first started doing it, I didn't realize he was doing an accent."
What?
Yeah, like
How could you possibly think? I mean, he's English, so maybe he thinks that's a weird regional accent in America, but really, though?
they both said that the accent he puts on is an accent that Peter's putting on, and he doesn't really speak like that.
Oh, did they? Because I read somewhere that Cage said he based it on his dad, who
Yeah.
was a literature professor, and it was like an affected wannabe English accent that an American would do.
Yeah, but they said in the commentary that Peter's faking it to present him trying to be smarter, and then it said that the accent comes and goes. I'm like, not really.
No, it's there the whole time. It does not come and go.
It goes into like Cage's voice. I'm like, no, he probably just puts it on more, but I don't believe that's a character affectation at all.
Yeah, I notice it straight away each time I watch it from the beginning. Although I guess he is, I think the first time you see him, he's hitting on a girl, so maybe he's trying to be fancier. I don't know. It doesn't drop off enough for me to buy that.
Yeah.
I think there's some mixed messaging going on there. But I'm glad I figured they explained where it came from because it is a weird choice. He does do a lot of accents. Like he's into accents in general, I think, in his career.
Do you see particularly any of Vampire's Kiss in Face Off?
It's weird. After watching Vampire's Kiss first and then Face Off, I actually felt a little underwhelmed by Cage's performance because it's so. The first time I saw Face Off, I thought this is a bonkers performance, just what I expected. This time around, I was like, oh, I can't really see that anymore, except for a handful of moments, and I've made notes of them. The dance scene has the when he's dressed as a priest at the beginning, when he does like his little kind of dirty wine in the convention center. That felt very Vampire's Kiss. Like I think I could see his character doing that. When he is Archer in the Cage body, Caster body, and they put some drugs in their drink and shoot it back when he ends up getting overly intoxicated. There's a roll that he does over the bed, which just seems so silly and like he just kind of out of nowhere does this funny somersault off the bed and then gets up. That felt very Vampire's Kiss Cage for me. And just the sort of hystericalness that he plays Archer with when he meets Eve, the wife, and tries to explain who he is. He is in between being kind of quiet and then crying and then outbursts, and it's just all over the place. So I think that that's kind of the only times I saw it. It was pretty understated otherwise.
That's exactly what I was thinking when I watched so many videos and the ones for Face Off, they keep saying, "Oh my God, these two are overacting their brains out," but I was like, No, he's not. It's like you have to watch Vampire's Kiss because he's actually like acting I love Face Off now, and my favorite scene in Face Off is when he's talking to Joan Allen about that story about the dentist and breaking her tooth. Like I find that beautiful. Like that's Cage acting in that sequence. Like the movie is bonkers. It's that well, how are they going to pull this off? Where it's like, how do you convince the wife? She sells it. Like she's amazing in this movie. Like she grounds it. Like she's one of the few people who is like, oh yeah, she's acting in it. And the way he pulls that off, and the way he's so serious, it actually just gets to me. I'm like, oh, this is a beautiful scene. Like I love that scene. But beyond that, it's yeah, it's the same sequences that you talk about. Like he goes over the top at the beginning to present Castor as this out of control maniac, but once he becomes Archer, yeah, there's only a few times that he really does his cageisms, but there's always a reason for it. It's like in the prison, he's screaming, "I'm Castor Troy." It's like him as Archer is going crazy. Like he's fighting because basically his character is like, "How did I get into this position?" So his mind is exploding. So he kind of would act like that, right? And then that whole sequence in the loft, it's like, yeah, he's on tons of drugs and he loses his mind. He does the bug eye shot, the same as Vampire's Kiss, but it's in context. So it's like, wow, he is really performing a character and actually I think more contained than normal in Face Off.
As I said, I agree that he's pulling back his cageisms for a reason. But do you feel like he is successfully behaving as Archer from what we've seen of John Travolta's performance up to that point? Like, do you really think this experienced investigator would get that surprised every time he sees himself in the mirror and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm Castor Troy."
It gets so confusing. Just say Cage as Archer as Castor. It's like, yeah, I never think of it for a second that it's Archer.
You okay? See, this is so hard to talk about Face Off because it confuses me. So when Cage is
Becomes
being Archer at Castor as Archer, when
when he's Travolta.
you never think that he's actually being Archer.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I agree. So it seems like he had an opportunity to study John Travolta and his mannerisms and then put that into his performance when he's supposed to be Archer with Castor Troy's face on. But I don't think he does that.
No.
And because it's Nicolas Cage, I have to stop and think that would be the way a traditional actor would approach this. And
It's,
he's not a traditional actor. So what do you think his approach was? Did he just think, well, that's too obvious. I'm not going to do that. Or do you think he just didn't do it well enough?
yeah, I don't know, especially with them where they kept saying it's like, oh, they talked and like studied each other. But I was like, well, specifically Travolta says, oh, Cage walks a certain way and he has certain speech patterns. I'll copy that. Cage does not walk anywhere like I've ever seen Travolta walk or the way he talks. So I think as an actor, it's a different choice where I think Cage is really good at playing the role of playing a character who's trying to be somebody else. I don't think that it's Archer. Travolta's the character he's playing, but I could see in his head that he's struggling with himself constantly and thinking, oh God, he's doing that, but I don't see any. Which I don't know if you have to. Like I don't know if it'd be too weird if he actually did just ape like Travolta, but I don't
It
get.
would be pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know. Would that make you think would have made the movie better?
Well, that I don't know. It's hard to say. So you sort of see him as just being into the idea of playing a character who's not himself. And that's about as far as it goes. Because that's kind of what he is in Vampire's Kiss, right? He's just playing a character who's all of a sudden not himself.
Yeah, and I think when he does, and maybe that's why he links them, right? Where he's just putting on this persona, it's like, oh, I'm becoming somebody else. Besides the fact that when he does unleash himself, it's like, oh yeah, there's Cage. you know, typified in Vampire's Kiss as well.
I was just going to say, just on sort of linked to this topic, is there a difference between what Nicolas Cage is doing in either of these movies and overacting?
The crazy thing that I was deciding on is that in Vampire's Kiss, that he's always in character. Like he's not overacting. It's like the character he's playing is really mentally unstable. So that's what Peter's doing. I don't know of any human being like that, but so he's just a businessman, right? And then he clearly has a lot of money, doesn't have success with women, so that, it's a lot of frustration. So then when the so-called bat comes in and gives them an idea that he could be a vampire, it just seems like I don't know if you think this, but towards the end I think, oh, that he actually hates himself. And that's why at the end he wants to die. It's like Alva's like, shoot me. Like I think he does have that. He doesn't know what to do with his life. He knows he's a horrible person, or he just doesn't know what to do. So that he is playing this role. So even if he doesn't really believe he's a vampire, he gets to play a role. It's like, oh, okay, I'm clearly a monster, so I should die. Like I think I'm reading way more into it than the films,
Hey, we both are. It's fine.
but analyzing, I'm like, there is a lot there besides, oh my god, look at Cage just go nuts and overact.
Yeah, I think it makes that question more interesting to say he's always this in character from beginning to end. He never drops it. So can it really be overacting if he's able to maintain this type of performance the whole way through? Is it overacting if that there's a purpose to it? But what about in Face Off though? Do you think that that's overacting, or I guess you think it's underacting? You thought he'd maybe do go crazier with it?
I'm rationalizing it after the fact that at the beginning you or he shows what a crazy character caster is. So at least it gives something for Travolta to do, because he only has a few scenes to create this character that Travolta has to sort of bounce off of. Whereas I think that was the problem with what Cage had to work with. Like Archer's a pretty boring character. He's just like obsessed with trying to find him, but there's not much there I found. So I was like, well, what is Cage gonna do? There's not much for him to mimic.
Yeah, that's fair. But it is weird for him to say, okay, I'm just going to make Archer, who's supposed to be this tough, kind of stoic cop, into this crybaby. Like, why does he cry so much in this movie? There's at least two or three scenes where he's just like, "Ugh." Like I didn't get from John Travolta's character from what we saw in the first quarter of the movie that he was that emotionally unstable.
I watched the deleted scenes on the Face Off disc. There is this long sequence where Sean Archer, I have to say Sean Archer Travolta is goes to his son's room, which is still all there, and it's just him bawling and crawling into the bed and doing all of that. He was like, "Oh, that's what you did? Fine." Oh, Nick, we cut that out. It's like, what? What do you mean you did do that?
Oh, well, okay, that explains a lot more because he cries when he sees his wife again. He cries when he sees the kid. He cries in jail. I was like, you're crying in jail? Come on, man. You knew what you signed up for when you swapped faces. As soon as he gets to jail as Castor Troy, he like forgot what he's supposed to be doing, and he's so slow to behave like Castor Troy. I was just annoyed at him. It's kind of funny that he chose to make him a lot more bumbling. All right, I guess I'll give him a pass on that.
Okay, so this, I guess, is a bit off topic, but I have to bring this up. So, when you watched it for the first time, did any of this plot madness bother you? Or you just accepted, okay, this is crazy.
No, it didn't bother me at all. I'm surprised that it bothered you. We're talking about a cop who takes the face of someone else to get just a little bit of information. I mean, that's the thing. They want to find out where a bomb is. It's important information, don't get me wrong. But it's not so complicated that you would need to steal someone's face and pretend you're them in order to get it. But that's what they do. So I was on board. I didn't think about it too much. Like the technology they used to show you the ear replacement. It's kind of like a 3D printer, so it's not that far off, right?
Because it wasn't the concept itself. Because like okay, and the writers always talk about it's supposed to be a sci-fi movie, so it is so-called realistic. This is the future where this could happen, and it wasn't the switching of the faces that bothered me. It was I guess the logic, which again I can now rationalize away because it's like, would did none of his coworkers of Sean Archer realize this big change? It's like like not that they would think that the face would change, but it's like they would just know something was wrong. And then the big thing, which the Joan Allen's character, the wife, it's like I know they say in the journal, it's like, oh, we haven't been intimate for a couple of months. But okay, now this is a question maybe too personal for you. You know what I'm gonna say because they bring it up into how did this get made. How does she not know she's not having sex with her husband?
It's a good question. I think in that podcast, the majority of the audience felt like they changed everything.
They can't change everything like that.
Maybe she just was happy and not asking any questions. Maybe they turned all the lights off. We don't get to see.
It's not
They
a
cut away.
well. This is gonna get into way too weird an area, but it doesn't matter if the lights are off. Does she not remember? Like, there's no way they're gonna have sex the same way because it's Castor Troy. Like, there's no.
Castor Troy with a woman would be a maniac. So she probably should have been like he's probably doing something weird. So she should probably know.
That's what bugged me that first time. I'm like, there's no way she would not. And I just couldn't get over that whole screening. I'm like, oh, come on. So then the moment that comes in and says that, she should say, I knew something was wrong with him.
That would have been hilarious if she was like, that night was a little different now that you mention it. Yeah, but you know what? I don't ask these questions when I'm watching something like Face Off.
See, there's less logic problems in Vampire's Kiss for me.
Yeah. Yeah, like how does he get off that water prison? Also, why does a prison have a giant flat screen TV for everybody to watch? It's just silly.
Yeah.
But that's okay. We don't see how he just jumps into the water and like, oh well, I guess he's dead. End of story. And all the police take off and stop looking for him. I would just figure after that first, you know, 10 minutes of the movie between them murdering his child in the opening sequence at a carousel and him dressed as a priest with his crazy dance moves and the scenes after that, I thought you would think maybe that would indicate to you that this movie doesn't really have a lot of logical thought put into things.
It was for like years when people kept coming to me and saying how great Face Off was. Like, I would complain about that all the time until eventually I just let it go and I
Just
love it.
turn your brain off,
Exactly.
enjoy the show.
It is a match made in heaven for Wu and Cage because John Woo, he loved improvising. Like, whenever he made his Hong Kong movies, he would always change things in the day and do drastic plot diversions and just sort of do things on the day. So he really did let Travolta and Cage go. As I said, he loves melodrama. There's a Hong Kong style of acting. And I don't know if you know that for the longest time, they shot all their movies silent so that they would overdub the dialogue in Cantonese and Mandarin. That was flexible as well. So they're like, oh, so essentially they were acting like German expressionists. Like, they were acting silently. They weren't sometimes even dubbing their own voice. So when they were
Hmm.
acting, so many actors did it way over the top because they're like, well, you may not hear my voice, but you know what I'm saying. And they're just crying too much or gesturing. So it's perfect to have Cage with Wu, right?
Hmm.
After the surgery, when he first sees his face in the mirror, Wu told Cage, he's like, do something. Like, his direction was, do something. I want to watch what you do. And had three cameras on it. So that's when Cage decided to pick up that coat hanger and smash the mirror. Like, he wasn't, no one told him to do that. But Wu was like, beautiful. I knew you'd come up with something outrageous and fantastic. So I think a lot of the movie was like that.
Yeah, I think that improv moment actually works though, because that's the first time he sees himself in the mirror. But then for some reason, Cage just keeps doing it. Like you shouldn't. Okay, you've been living in his face for a while now. Stop getting spooked each time you see it.
But it's the face of the guy who killed your son.
Yeah, I know. He's been looking at him. What did he say? He's been following this guy for 10 years or something. He knows what his face looks like. Does it make a difference for Cage to be in a good movie or just be good in a movie?
Having Cage in your movie generally means he will be very interesting. The problem is a lot of times he's not in the same movie as everybody else. You're just coming along and then you're like, wait, what is happening? Which could destroy your enjoyment of the movie. With Cage in Face Off, it works because the whole movie is bonkers, right? You have the two leads just overacting and being crazy. Everybody else is playing it straight. Well, maybe except for Nick Cassavetes, who improved a lot too and had a lot of fun with Cage in those scenes. I would actually rather have Cage unleashed.
Yeah.
Like in Wild at Heart, it was a perfect combination because I think his character really fit, and I'm sure he did definitely love playing that character. But in Oliver Stone's 9/11 movie, he's like a fireman. He's so restrained in that film.
Oh, I haven't seen that. I forgot about that. He was in that movie.
He's played so straight. I kept thinking, why did you bother with Nicolas Cage? Which is totally not fair. Like he's really good at it, but it's like, oh, but anybody could have played this role.
Yeah, it's not what he's a performer. You want to give him something to really perform with, I guess.
Yeah. And then when he won his Academy Award for Leaving Las Vegas, again, that is the character. He's a drunk, so he's out of control, and it really works for him. But what do you think? What would you prefer?
I think, and this is a cheat, I think Cage is best when he's unhinged, but in a good movie. And what I mean by that is that the good movie, quote unquote, has to be qualified in the sense that it's not a normal traditional melodrama. It has to be kind of out there too, so that their energies match. And I feel like Vampire's Kiss falls short in that sense because the energy of the movie doesn't really match his energy. Face Off is there's a lot going on. There's tons of action. The action sequences are pretty cool. So there's tons of energy in that to meet his what you would expect his performance to be. But I'm just thinking about all the things I love Nicolas Cage in. The director has a similar sensibility of just doing something different. And so his bonkers performance becomes better because of that. Like I said, Herzog and Bad Lieutenant, like it's just when I heard that movie was coming out, it just seemed like the perfect combination. He's totally unleashed in that, but in a way that's completely matched by what Herzog's doing. And even something like adaptation. In terms of tone, it's pretty restrained, but the idea behind the story and the way that it's treated, it's a pretty crazy story. He's playing twin characters, and it's out there enough that it makes him better.
Yeah.
So I think that's the sweet spot for me. But at the end of the day, even if the movie's bad, I think you can find something enjoyable about him in it, even if you don't understand why he's doing the things that he's doing. you know, like the Wicker Man remake is not particularly a good movie, but his reacting to the movie that he's in makes it good. It's like he's in a different movie and his reactions are turned up to 11.
Well, even like the improv again in the loft in Face Off when he goes, "What are you gonna do?" So I'm gonna do a little surgery. I'm gonna take his face off. Like everybody else is like,
It's,
"What? Wait, he's saying the title. He's saying the title." And he just gives over and over again. Of course, Cassavetes goes, "You gotta take his face off," and he just went with it too, because Wu. I didn't know that he said he actually yelled "cut," but the cameras were still rolling. He goes, "Oh, thank God they were still rolling." And then afterwards, he goes, "Oh, I loved it," and he put it in the film because it's ridiculous, but I think it fits. It's like his character's on drugs. He's losing his mind. and it's what he actually wants to do. He wants his face back, so he does that thing. And that, oh yeah, only Cage could have pulled off something like that again. Like it's amazing. Because
So do you think, so I was reading, obviously we talked about that he draws from German expressionism and he knows he's purposely trying to do something different in his acting style. But I read a quote that Ethan Hawke said that he's the only actor since Marlon Brando that's actually done anything new with the art.
yeah,
What do you think about that?
I think it's true because again, last stuff I read, he's like, yeah, I don't like naturalism. Like he wants to perform. He talks about like kabuki, Japanese opera. I don't know that anybody else is really copying Cage though, are they?
No, he's he might have crafted this new acting style, but I think he's still on his own there. And I think if somebody had told me that before I had rewatched these movies and looked over his filmography, I would have scoffed at it, I think. I would have been like, I don't know, been doubtful. But rewatching these again and looking over his other movies and thinking about his performances, I think I'm into it. I think I agree.
Yeah.
Who else has done this style of performance? And the thing that clinches it for me is that it's there from the beginning, like you said. You know, people talk about both of these movies being sort of Cage becoming the Cage we know, even though they're so far apart in time. But he's done it from the beginning, and he's never stopped
Yeah.
doing it in some form. I think he has decided against method naturalism. He's doing some kind of like throwback version of silent acting and decided that straight away from the beginning and will continue to do it and be the only one doing it. But I think I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, a new generation of actor who grew up watching his movies tries to do it in some form.
Yeah, so do you think it's a contradiction when he doesn't want to really be naturalistic, but sometimes he does act method? Like, in Vampire's Kiss, it's like, oh, well, I want to eat an actual cockroach because I want to know how it feels, right? And that poor thing, got, well, he ate three of them. And then when the bat flew around, he kept saying, oh, I want to catch a real bat. Is that strange that he wants it to be like a realistic environment, but he's not going to act realistic?
But maybe that's what's new about it, because if he was just doing method, he would be like Brando or, you know, De Niro or somebody. And if he was just being German expressionism, he would just be like that and wouldn't have this element to it. So I think it's new because he's taking two predominant styles of acting and smashing them together to make something new out of them.
That's good because I was thinking that his reactions to these real life situations are not normal. But he,
That's the thing. You put him in the situation, and whereas everyone else would come up with some sort of nuanced, understated method version of that experience, he's such a weirdo that his natural version of that true experience is so over the top that it puts him in another category. He's never going to react the way a regular person would react, so he can't really truly fit in with that group of actors.
I love when he's screaming at Alva in Vampire's Kiss when he does the bug eyes. When he just said, I just want to see how big my eyes could get to scare her. And that was why he did it.
Oh man, I wish I could hear interviews with her. I should have looked for it. What would that be like?
Yeah, the interesting thing was he has great things to say about Maria Conchita Alonso, but not about Jennifer Beals.
Yeah, I think neither of them really liked each other, right?
Yeah, and I read something that when they're making out, he wanted to feel aroused, but it just wasn't happening with her, so that they poured yogurt on his toes because he forced them to do that to get him in the mood.
Ew, I don't know what that means and I don't want to know. Let's move on. It's so, I mean, of course, of course, you would say something like that, but also, that's enough information for me.
As you said, that this was actually a perfect combination of Cage and a director, where they did play off each other and really pushed it. And in terms of me saying that, I think Cage decided, oh, I'm going to play a character who's just fighting with himself, or is good and bad, and that's what the main thrust of Wu's two masterpieces, like Hardboiled and The Killer. They're both about that. It's like you have a cop and a killer, and the killer both are good and bad. And then you get hard boiled where you think, oh, there's one good cop and one criminal, and it's not what you think, and they're both good and bad. Because apparently Cage was a big fan of Woo's movies. And that's why at the beginning, when he has that sniper rifle, he has that mustache on, because in The Killer, Chow Yun-fat does that. He has a sniper rifle and a fake mustache. So I'm like, Cage loved it. And Cage is being Cage. He's like, can I put a mustache on because of that? And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
So,
And also just thinking like, the double gold guns with the dragons on them. There's very few actors I could think of who could play that villain, and I would be like, yeah, this is totally a weird briefcase of things that he would have. A couple of guns that are gold, with dragons, with some chiclets. And you look up and it's Cage. Those are his things. It just makes sense. So I think he's a good Woo villain. As I said, his energy is matched by Wu's directing energy, especially the action sequences. I think the attitude behind the scenes in Vampire's Kiss of the director sort of matched Cage in the sense that it was his first movie and he probably thought Cage was pretty wild and interesting and let him go for it. I just don't think that his skill as a director made the movie work as well. I mean, maybe we've already talked about this, but is there a good or a bad version of Cage? Like, can you say this Cage performance was bad?
I mean, in a different movie, like in general,
Yeah. Like, does he have good and bad, or is it just Cage?
I think it's just Cage. You just think, oh, he's just overacting and ruining the movie. He just chooses a character and goes with it. And it's usually over the top. That's the whole issue.
I think maybe that's the genius of his acting style. You can't ever really say it's bad because you can't completely understand it.
Yeah.
There's enough ambivalence there for you to go, but he meant to do that. So maybe it is bad, but you just can't tell, and that's why it's genius. Or maybe he's found some sort of in between good and bad, so that it's irrelevant. So I think I do love it when he's unhinged, as you say. But I think I would say, although I really enjoy it when you get those classic Cage moments, like I said, when we saw Mandy, it was different from what I was expecting, but there were a couple of moments where you're like, yeah, that's the Cage that we all know and love. So don't get me wrong, I love it. I look forward to moments of it. But I think at the end of the day, I don't necessarily need him to be completely Vampire's Kiss unhinged in every movie. I just expect to be surprised. And the surprise could be he's just a really underplayed dad or something, which would be surprising. Or it could be Vampire's Kiss, where you're just like, whoa, nobody else could do this. So I think that's where I'm at right now with him.
I think with a lot of his movies, it does take at least two viewings to really appreciate it.
Yeah. One to be like, what's happening? And one to be like, oh, that's what he was trying to do. It definitely takes at least two viewings. It's pretty good.
So for the trailer of Vampire's Kiss, had you seen it before? Or was this your first time?
Never seen this trailer before. This trailer looked like the trailer of a comedy. It had like wacky 80s music. It almost felt like in the vein of like Weekend at Bernie's, oh, what a situation to be in kind of comedy. Of course, they leave out all the really dark stuff. I think even if they had had this music in the actual movie, it would have felt more like a comedy. But again, it's completely different from what you actually get.
Yeah, that's why I was confused that first time. And it did seem like, oh, this is another wacky 80s comedy. And then as the movie went on the first time, I was like, I don't think I'm supposed to be laughing. This is upsetting in many ways. So it's really a trick. But I don't know how else you sell it. You can't sell it as a
I don't know, but I kind of love the idea that some people bought a ticket to this thinking it was going to be, an 80s romp. And instead, they get this completely bizarro German expressionistic performance. You would think you came to the wrong movie. You'd have to check your ticket stub and be like, wait, is this the right one? Is this Vampire's Kiss? That was you.
yeah, for the Face Off trailer.
I kind of liked that they filmed some kind of a new scene where they reveal, spin around the camera. It's not Travolta anymore. It's Nicolas Cage. I liked that. I don't know why. After that, I was kind of bored.
I love that. I love when they shoot something, gets me all interested. It gives you a sense of the movie. But it was interesting how it just was just generic shots of the exploding, so you don't know. But I appreciate it in the sense of, again, I was coming from John Woo. I was like, oh my God, there's gonna be amazing action in it. And that sequence at the beginning, which was released as a separate teaser first, and then they blended it into a trailer. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, it's true. And like you say, if you, and I actually made a note when I was watching it, it's like they just made it for John Woo fans, that trailer. Just like, don't worry, we got you. This is all the stuff you're looking for. And then when you watch the movie, it kind of goes from being for John Woo fans only to being for Nicolas Cage fans.
Yeah.
And it kind of evens out, I think. But I don't know. I guess because it was just straight up action scenes, I found it a little bit boring. But at least it makes sense about the movie that you're going to watch. Whereas like Vampire's Kiss, it's completely off the mark. So I think it wins that.
Yeah. I don't think Face Off's a great trailer, but it was more of like, yeah, Woo fans going nuts. I just was like, okay, I'm just excited because I was in no matter what, and I didn't really care about the plot. But yeah, but it's not a great trailer. I mean, I don't know. It does what it does.
Yeah, I guess the job done. It's fine.
All right, I start with you first.
So which is the best version of Cage? Best use of Cage's talents? I'm going to go with Vampire's Kiss, even though I think Face Off makes more, well, you don't think it makes sense, but I think it makes more sense as a movie. Not because it's way more unhinged, which it is. That purpose is there the whole way through, and I never questioned it. Whereas, like I said, with Face Off, I was like, okay, now that he's supposed to be Archer wearing Castor's face, it doesn't quite seem like he's being Archer. I couldn't figure out if he was trying to be John Travolta's character or if he was just doing his own thing. So there's some question there about what was happening. So that makes me question whether he was as successful in doing his special brand of acting as he was in Vampire's Kiss.
I can't believe it because I basically have the same opinion. Anybody else doing Vampire's Kiss would have done any of that, so the movie would have been totally different. It's because of Cage. I say playing a character that seems to be acting the way he honestly should from what is presented. When I think of Face Off, which I honestly love Face Off a million times more than Vampire's Kiss the movie, I think you could have gotten a different actor than Cage, and I would have really enjoyed it. Right? I think it's because I love Wu so much and the concept. Again, I don't think you would have taken away too much from Travolta pretending to be Castor if it was somebody else. And as we said, I don't find that Cage is really mimicking Travolta that much. So it's not like, oh, he was the only one who could have done that performance. But yeah, in the end, I just have to pick Vampire's Kiss. And if there's any kind of tiebreaker, it's broken by this.
Put it in the right file according to alphabetical order. A, B, C, D, E, F, G,
Peter.
H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P,
Peter.
Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Huh? That's all you have to do.
And I love that the fact that he says every single gesture was rehearsed by me and my cat in my hotel room.
It's true. That's a good way to qualify it. If you took Cage out of Face Off and put someone else over the top in, it would probably still have elements of that and be good. But you can't do that with Vampire's Kiss. No one else could look at a page on a script that just had the alphabet. And it wasn't the script. I think the only improv thing in all of Vampire's Kiss was that cockroach eating scene.
Yeah.
Everything else was in the script.
Yeah.
Who else could have taken the alphabet and done it like that?
Yeah.
Nobody.
It's his line readings when he's at his desk just saying Alva. And I was like,
Alva.
only he would have done it that way.
Yeah.
I don't know. When I thought of this topic, I was like, I just want to talk about Face Off. But in the end, these parameters, I'm like, Vampire's Kiss is just, it's gold. He's That's when Cage became Cage for me in that movie. And that, unbeknownst to me when I first saw it, it's just, now looking back on it, it's like, wow, this is mind-boggling.
Yeah, for sure. This is the caginess of Cage coming out in full force.
Yeah.
I think for the first time.
Yeah.
Great.
Join us next time when we discuss adapting stage musicals with Phantom of the Opera and Les Miserables. Thank you for listening.